"You need to stop asking questions, Mrs. Rowe," the nurse said, her tone sharp as a needle. "The doctor already told you, your memory isn't reliable anymore." Her name was Nurse Pamela, but everyone in the ward just called her Pam. She wore her kindness like a uniform, crisp, practiced, and easy to take off. I sat there in that hospital bed, the smell of antiseptic thick in the air, my hands gripping the edge of the blanket like it might anchor me to something real. "Reliable," I repeated slowly, tasting the word. "That's a funny word for the truth." She smiled, that condescending, sweet smile people use when they talk to the old or the dying. "Sometimes forgetting helps us heal," she said, checking the 4 line in my arm. "You've been through a lot, dear. It's better to rest." Then she took my wedding ring off. She said it like it was nothing, like a favor. "We'll keep it in the nurse's locker for safety," she murmured. "Hospital policy." Her fingers were fast, efficient. The gold band slipped from my finger as if it had been waiting for the chance to escape. I didn't protest then. I was still too weak, too drugged maybe. My mind felt wrapped in gauze, my thoughts soft and muffled. But somewhere inside me, something twitched. A spark. A quiet, angry heartbeat. When she walked away, the room felt colder. My husband had given me that ring 48 years ago in a courthouse with flickering lights and chipped paint. It was the one thing I'd asked to keep on, even through surgery. And now it was gone, taken in the name of policy. I stared at my hand. The pale indentation around the missing band looked like a ghostly circle, a promise broken by someone who thought I wouldn't notice. By nightfall, I realized I was missing more than just my ring. My wallet, too. My gold cross pendant. The nurse said she'd secured them. But when I asked for proof, she changed the subject. That's when I started remembering, slowly, carefully. Not the way they wanted me to. I remembered my fall. The sound of glass breaking, the sharp pain behind my eyes. The panic in my daughter-in-law's voice as she called 911. I remembered how calm she sounded when she thought I couldn't hear. "No rush, she's stable. Just dizzy." And I remembered the last words I said before I blacked out, "Don't touch the drawer." It was the drawer in my bedroom, the one where I kept the folder marked for when I'm gone. Inside were copies of my will, the deed to my house, and a note explaining everything my son didn't know, about the second insurance policy, about the savings I'd hidden after my husband's death, about who the money was really meant for. My granddaughter, Abby. Not my son. Not his wife. That drawer had been locked for 10 years. The key was on the same chain as my cross pendant, the one Nurse Pamela had just taken. I lay awake that night, pretending to sleep, listening to the rhythmic hum of the ventilators down the hall. Every sound felt suspicious, the squeak of shoes, the flick of a light switch, the rustle of papers. I thought of my daughter-in-law's smile when she kissed my cheek before leaving. It had been too soft, too final. "She's in good hands," she'd said to the nurse on her way out. Now I wondered whose hands those really were. The next morning, I woke to find my medication tray different. 2 pills instead of 4. A new bottle label I didn't recognize. "What's this one for?" I asked. Pamela glanced at it quickly. "Just a mild sedative. Doctor's orders." "I never needed that before," I said. She looked at me, not angry, but assessing, like a poker player deciding whether to bluff. "You've been restless," she said finally. "And confused." Confused. That word again. They were all so quick to use it, as if my age were a diagnosis. When she left, I hid the pill under my tongue until she turned the corner, then spat it into a napkin and tucked it under the mattress. I wanted to see if it was really medicine, or something to keep me quiet. By afternoon, the room felt smaller. My roommate, a kind man named Howard, had been moved out for tests. I was alone now, and no one told me why. I pressed the call button once, twice. No one came. I counted the seconds between footsteps in the hall. I watched the door. I started writing things down, the names on badges, the times they checked vitals, the faces that looked away too quickly. At 6:17 p.m., I saw Pamela talking to a man in a suit near the nurse's station. He wasn't a doctor. His shoes were too shiny, his smile too rehearsed. He handed her a paper. She nodded. Then she looked straight at my door. And smiled. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until the corridor lights dimmed for the night shift, then sat up and opened the drawer of the bedside table. It was empty, except for a folded patient form. I unfolded it slowly. It was a consent form. For a transfer. To a memory care facility, 2 hours away. The date was tomorrow. My signature was already on it. That was the moment I stopped being scared. I remembered too much to be scared. I remembered that my daughter-in-law had once worked in home insurance. She knew exactly how property transfers worked, especially when someone was declared incompetent. I remembered that last month, she'd asked if I'd updated my will just in case. And I remembered her hands, hovering over that drawer, the one I'd locked. If they wanted me to forget, it wasn't for my health. It was for their profit. But I'd been underestimated before. At 3 a.m., I carefully removed the 4-needle from my arm. It hurt like sin, but I didn't flinch. I took Howard's forgotten cardigan from the chair, it was too big, but warm, and slipped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. I moved slowly, pretending to be disoriented when anyone passed. Old people were invisible here, I used that to my advantage. At the nurse's desk, I saw the logbook. And right there, under personal belongings, my name was listed. Beside it, Locker 7B, signed by Pamela. I found the lockers in the back hallway. Each one had a small label and a cheap padlock. 7B was half open. Inside, wrapped in a paper towel, was my ring, my pendant, and a folded note. In neat handwriting, "Stop asking questions. You'll thank us later." My blood went cold. Pamela's handwriting was round and feminine. I recognized it from the labels on my pill bottles. But the tone? That wasn't hers. That was my daughter-in-law's. They were working together. For what? For the money in the envelope I'd hidden in that drawer? For the insurance policy that named Abby? No, for something bigger. Something permanent. I heard footsteps approaching, quick and heavy. I shoved everything into the pocket of the cardigan and slipped into the supply room. My heart thudded so loud I was sure they could hear it. Through the narrow slit of the door, I saw Pamela walk past, whispering into her phone. "She's awake again," she said. "I told you, we need to move her before the review." Before the review. The medical review that would legally determine my capacity to handle my own estate. Once that paper went through, I'd be medically incompetent. Everything I owned, my home, my savings, would fall into family management. Their management. I sank to the floor, clutching the pendant in my palm. The tiny metal key attached to it pressed into my skin, the key to the drawer back home. They thought I'd forget that too. But memory is a funny thing. It hides when you don't need it, and it claws its way back when you do. The next morning, I acted weaker. I let Pamela think she'd won. She adjusted my blanket, smiled her sweet plastic smile, and said, "Don't worry, dear. Tomorrow will be a new start." "Oh," I said softly. "I think you're right." Because while she turned to note my vitals, I slipped her keycard from her coat pocket. She didn't even notice. By afternoon, I was ready. If they wanted to take my memories, they'd have to take my proof first. And I wasn't letting that happen. I glanced at the wall clock, it's ticking louder than before, almost taunting. 4:47 p.m. visiting hours. I knew my daughter-in-law would show up soon, dressed in sympathy and perfume. I smiled faintly to myself, hiding the keycard under my pillow. She'd expect confusion, helplessness, obedience. What she'd find instead was a woman who remembered everything. And by the time she realized that, I'd already have everything I needed to bring them down. When I woke the next morning, the room smelled of bleach and lies. The kind of sterile air that tried too hard to feel clean. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like an accusation. Pamela was there before sunrise, humming to herself as she refilled my 4-stand. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You slept through the night," she said, glancing at my chart. "That's progress." Progress, I thought, would have been waking up somewhere I could trust. She didn't notice my hands beneath the blanket, fingers tracing the smooth edge of her stolen keycard. It was still there. My only weapon in a place built to disarm people like me. "You'll have a visitor later," she added. "Your daughter-in-law called. She's bringing your paperwork to sign before the transfer." I stared at her. Paperwork. Pamela smiled like a teacher explaining arithmetic to a slow child. The move to your new care facility. You'll have a lovely private room there. Private room. Isolated. Controlled. Forgotten. I swallowed my panic. That sounds nice, I said softly. Thank you for looking out for me. Her expression softened, pride in her little performance. We only want what's best for you. I watched her leave, her perfume lingering in the doorway like false comfort. When her footsteps faded, I exhaled slowly. My heart thudded like a drum beneath my ribs. She thought I was docile, sedated. But I'd spat out every pill she gave me since last night, slipping them into my napkin. Hidden under the mattress, I had a small stash proof, if anyone would believe me. The key card glinted faintly as I turned it over in my palm. Locker 7B. There had to be more in there than just my jewelry, something they didn't want me to see. The hallway outside was quiet, save for the squeak of a distant cleaning cart. I shuffled to the door, peeked through the small glass panel, and slipped out barefoot. My hospital gown brushed against the cold tile as I moved. I knew which door was theirs now. The staff room. A keypad lock. I swiped the card. A soft green light blinked. Inside, the scent of coffee and disinfectant mingled with something else, perfume and money. I searched quickly, every nerve on edge. On the corkboard above the sink, I saw a folded paper pinned under a schedule, memory care intake, Roe Evelyn. My name. Under it, a line written in pen, family signature verified, pre-authorization received. I unfolded the paper. The signature was there, shaky, deliberate. But not mine. My daughter-in-law had signed for me. The greed wasn't about a few savings or jewelry anymore. This was about control, legal, permanent control. They were selling my house. At the bottom of the form was the address of a care home I'd never heard of. Willow Grove Memory Center. I'd seen ads for it, luxury care for those who need peace. Expensive. Remote. The kind of place where people vanished behind nice curtains. A noise behind me. I froze. Pamela's voice. You shouldn't be in here. I turned slowly. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I was just looking for my file, I said, trying to sound confused, small. She stepped closer. You know that's not allowed. I forget sometimes, I whispered. Her gaze softened again, that patronizing sympathy that hid cruelty underneath. That's why you need help. You can't keep living in the past. She reached out as if to guide me back, but her fingers brushed my wrist, searching. Checking. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Where's your 4-line? I must have pulled it out in my sleep, I said. Her lips tightened. You're being difficult, Mrs. Rowe. Let's get you back to bed. When I hesitated, her tone dropped, just a hint of steel. Now. I shuffled past her, my pulse pounding. The paper was hidden inside my sleeve. As soon as she turned, I slipped it under the blanket. She fussed with my chart for a minute, adjusting my medication list. I watched her write something new in red ink. Then she smiled again. Doctor's orders, we're changing your meds. Just to help you rest before the transfer. When she left, I leaned forward, reading the note she'd just added. Increased dosage, uncooperative patient. I wasn't just being moved. I was being erased. By lunchtime, my daughter-in-law arrived. Her name was Melissa, and she walked like a woman who'd never been told no in her life. Neat blonde hair, expensive handbag, fake warmth. Oh Mom, she said, hugging me carefully, like I might crumble. You look so much better today. Do I? I asked. She smiled. You'll feel even better after tomorrow. The new place is beautiful, quiet, clean, no stress. Just peace. She opened her tote and pulled out a clipboard. They just need a few signatures to finalize everything. Here. Her manicured hand tapped the line marked authorization for transfer of care. My fingers trembled, but not from weakness. You've been busy, I said. She didn't flinch. Just trying to make things easier for you. I looked at her wedding ring, large diamond, same hand that had touched my locked drawer weeks ago. Did you find what you were looking for? Her eyes flicked up. What? The papers, I said softly. In my bedroom. For a moment, she froze. Then she laughed, airy and fake. Mom, you've been through a lot. The fall, the surgery, it's natural to get things mixed up. She slid the pen toward me. Just sign. I smiled faintly, my hand hovering over the paper. Of course. But instead of signing, I pressed my palm down, right on the page, smearing the ink just enough to ruin the line. Oh, my hand's not steady, I murmured. I'll try again later. Her jaw tightened. Fine. I'll come back. She turned to leave, and as she did, a folded paper slipped from her bag, a copy of my house deed. I caught the faint heading, Property Transfer Application, Pending Approval. So it was true. They were selling my home. My husband's house. The one place he'd built with his own hands. When she left, I sat in silence, staring at the spot where her perfume still lingered. My stomach burned with the kind of anger that clears your mind. I waited until evening, until the corridors grew quiet again. I pressed the call button once, twice. No one came. Perfect. Using Pamela's keycard, I slipped back into the staff room. I knew I didn't have long. I opened locker 7B again. This time, there was a small envelope inside with my name written neatly. Inside were photos. Photos of me, in bed, half asleep, 4 attached. Taken from angles no patient should be photographed from. And beneath them, a USB drive labeled Row Assessment. I plugged it into the staff computer. A folder popped up instantly. Audio files. I clicked one. Pamela's voice. Subject displays signs of disorientation. Likely dementia. Unsafe to manage finances independently. Then Melissa's voice, calm and clipped. We'll move forward once she's classified as mentally unfit. The property is under joint review. My vision blurred. My fingers trembled against the mouse. They'd built a case against me, fabricated evidence, staged confusion. Every lost item, every switched pill, every red mark on my chart. And I was the star witness in my own erasure. I copied the files onto a small memory card I'd found in the desk. My hands shook, but my heart was steady. I tucked it into my gown's pocket just as I heard footsteps in the hall. Pamela's voice again, closer. She's been getting out of bed at night. We'll have to restrain her if this keeps up. I slipped out the back door, heart pounding. The corridor split in two, one path toward the nurses' station, the other toward the supply wing. I turned left, deeper into the dark. The air smelled faintly of bleach and flowers. The morgue was nearby. I found a janitor's closet and ducked inside, crouching low. Through the crack, I saw Pamela and a male nurse pass by. She's getting unpredictable, the man said. What if she calls someone? She can't, Pamela replied. Her phone privileges were revoked this morning. How long do we keep this up? Until Melissa signs the sale, Pamela said flatly. Then the paperwork disappears. Their footsteps faded. I waited 5 minutes before emerging. My knees ached, my back screamed, but I was free, and I had proof. I needed a phone. In the reception area, there was one behind the visitor desk. I could see it from across the hall, glowing faintly in the dark. I moved as quietly as I could, the hospital slippers barely whispering on tile. I reached the desk and picked up the receiver. Dead line. They disconnected the main line. My pulse quickened. I turned, ready to retreat, and nearly ran straight into Pamela. She stood inches away, her expression serene. You really shouldn't wander at night, Mrs. Rowe. My throat went dry. I just wanted water. She smiled, holding a syringe in her hand, clear fluid catching the fluorescent light. Let's get you back to bed. You're confused again. No, I said quietly, stepping back. I remember perfectly. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I remember the papers. The fake recordings. The lies you told. She took one slow step closer. You shouldn't say things you don't understand. I reached into my pocket, gripping the memory card like a weapon. I understand enough. Her tone sharpened. Give it to me. Come take it. For a moment, neither of us moved. The hallway light flickered, humming faintly. Then she lunged. I stumbled backward, the phone cord tangling around my wrist. My knee hit the desk hard, but I kept my balance. Her syringe clattered to the floor, rolling beneath the counter. In the chaos, the security alarm on her badge beeped faintly. She'd triggered it. I didn't wait. I ran. I pushed through the emergency exit doors into the cold night air. The alarm wailed behind me, echoing down the empty parking lot. Rain hit my face like needles, but it felt clean, real. Somewhere in the distance, I saw headlights approaching. Maybe security. Maybe worse. But I didn't stop. Because I wasn't confused. I wasn't broken. I was awake. And if they thought they could silence me with drugs, lies, and forged papers, they were about to remember who I really was. I didn't know where I was running at first. The rain blurred the parking lot lights into streaks of gold and white, and the cold stung my cheeks. My bare feet slapped the pavement, the hospital gown clinging to my skin. Somewhere behind me, alarms wailed, and over the intercom, a calm voice said, "Code white. Patient exit." Patient. That's what I was to them, a file, a diagnosis, an inconvenience. I ran until my lungs burned and the world tilted. A car horn blared, and I stumbled to the edge of the lot, gripping a signpost for balance. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the storm. For a second, I thought I might collapse right there. Then I saw headlights. A security van turned the corner. 2 guards jumped out, flashlights cutting through the rain. "Ma'am," one shouted. "You're not supposed to be out here." I could have begged. I could have cried. But instead, I forced my voice steady. "I need the police," I said. "Now." They hesitated, probably expecting confusion, not clarity. "Ma'am, let's get you back inside." I held up the memory card. It glinted under the flashlight beam like a lifeline. "You touch me, and this goes straight to the news," I said, praying they couldn't see my hands shaking. "You think I don't know what's happening? I have proof." One guard lowered his light, uncertain. "Proof of what?" "Fraud. Elder abuse. Medical manipulation." I stared him down. "You bring me back in there, and you'll be part of it." That made them pause. The other one muttered something into his radio, and for a moment, the rain and static were the only sounds. "Stay here," he said finally. "I'm calling this in." Good, I thought. Call whoever you want. I sank onto the curb, shivering, hugging myself. My body hurt all over, but I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, my mind was mine again. A minute later, a police cruiser pulled up. A young officer stepped out, rain slicking his hair. "Mrs. Rowe," he asked cautiously. "You left the hospital without discharge. Are you injured?" "I'm fine," I said. "But someone inside is breaking the law." He gave me that look, the same one doctors use when they think you're fragile. "Why don't we get you somewhere warm first?" I said I'm fine. I forced myself to meet his eyes. "There's a nurse, Pamela Hayes, and my daughter-in-law Melissa Rowe. They've been falsifying medical records to declare me unfit. They want to take my house." He blinked. The rain ran down his collar, and I could see him weighing whether to humor me or believe me. "Do you have proof?" I held up the memory card. "Right here." That was the first moment he looked at me not as a patient, but as a witness. The next few hours blurred together, a small police station, a blanket around my shoulders, a mug of bitter coffee I couldn't taste. A detective named O'Connor took my statement. He was in his 40s, sandy hair, eyes that had seen too many scams and too few truths. "You're saying they altered your records?" he asked. "Yes. Audio files, false notes, drugs I didn't need." "And the motive?" "My home," I said simply. "It's worth almost $800,000. My son and his wife want to sell it. But my will leaves it to my granddaughter, Abby." He scribbled a few notes. "Do you have any living relatives who can verify your story?" "Abby," I said. "She's in college in Oregon. I haven't spoken to her in a year, but she'll know. I wrote her letters, kept copies in a drawer at home." He nodded slowly. "We'll check into it." They gave me a cot in the staff lounge that night. I lay awake, staring at the flickering vending machine light. My heart still raced, but the fear was different now. Focused. In the morning, Detective O'Connor came back with a USB stick and a grim face. "We listened to your recordings," he said. You're right. It's not standard procedure, and the signatures on your transfer forms look off. My throat tightened. So you believe me? I believe something's wrong, he said carefully. But it's complicated. We need corroboration, another witness, a physical copy of the will, something they can't dismiss as confusion. My house, I said instantly. The drawer in my bedroom. There's a folder marked for when I'm gone. It has everything, the real will, the insurance papers, my husband's letter. And Abby's name. He nodded. We'll get a warrant. I shook my head. By the time you do, they'll be gone. Melissa's smart, she'll clear it out the minute she hears I escaped. He sighed. Mrs. Rowe, I can't just break into a house because. Then take me, I said. I'll go myself. He hesitated. You're still under hospital supervision. Not anymore, I said firmly. If you leave me here, they'll make sure I never wake up again. He studied me for a long moment, then exhaled. Let me make a call. By noon, we were parked across the street from my house. It looked smaller than I remembered, white siding, trimmed hedges, an American flag fluttering weakly in the breeze. The home my husband built, the one where every photo on the wall had meant something. Melissa's car was in the driveway. O'Connor handed me a raincoat and said quietly, "Stay in the car." I waited 5 minutes. Then I didn't. Through the window I saw her, standing in my living room, talking to a man in a dark suit. A realtor, maybe. She handed him a folder. He smiled. My blood boiled. I slipped out of the cruiser, ignoring O'Connor's protest. The grass squelched under my shoes as I crossed the street. My key still fit the side door. Inside, the house smelled like lavender cleaner and betrayal. Furniture covered in plastic. My photos stacked in boxes. The home I'd built, being dismantled piece by piece. Melissa turned when she heard the door. Her eyes widened. "Mom?" Her voice hit that high, fake note people use when they're caught. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the bedroom. The drawer was open, empty. She followed me in. "You shouldn't be here." "Where is it?" I asked quietly. "Where's what?" "The folder." She folded her arms. "You're not well, Mom. You need to go back to the hospital." "Don't lie to me." I snapped. The sound shocked even me, sharp, loud, alive. For a second, her mask slipped. "You don't understand," she said. "This is for the best. You can't live alone anymore. You could have fallen again. So you'll sell my house?" "It's not about money," she said quickly, too quickly. "It's about safety." "Then why the forged forms? The recordings?" Her face froze. I stepped closer. "You underestimated me, Melissa. You thought the drugs would make me forget. But I remember everything." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You don't have proof." I smiled faintly. "Oh, but I do." O'Connor appeared in the doorway then, badge flashing. "Melissa Rowe? I need you to step aside." Her face drained of color. "Who are you?" "Detective O'Connor, Sanfield PD. We have reason to believe you've been tampering with medical and legal records." "This is ridiculous," she said, turning to me. "Mom, tell him you're confused." But I didn't. I looked her dead in the eye. "I'm not confused. I'm remembering." 2 hours later, the house was sealed off. Officers photographed everything, the shredded papers in the trash, the laptop open on the counter, the fake will saved on the desktop. Melissa sat on the couch, pale and trembling, while O'Connor spoke quietly to another officer. I wandered into the kitchen, where the light fell soft through the blinds. The same tile my husband and I had laid 30 years ago. I could still see his hands, strong, patient, stained with grout and laughter. "Mrs. Rowe." O'Connor's voice broke my thoughts. "We found something else." He handed me a sealed envelope. It was old, yellowed at the edges. My name was written in my husband's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, one I'd never seen. "Evie, if you ever read this, it means something's gone wrong. The savings account is under Abby's name, First Branch, Lockwood Bank. Keep it secret until she's grown. Some people can't be trusted with money, not even family. At the bottom, a small key taped to the paper. I couldn't breathe for a moment. All this time, I'd thought the secret I was protecting was the will, but he'd protected something too. Something bigger. I looked at O'Connor. I need to call my granddaughter. He nodded. We already did. She's on her way. For the first time in weeks, my body felt light. I went to the window and watched the police cars outside, the flashing lights painting my white picket fence red and blue. Justice wasn't done yet, but it had begun. Melissa would face charges, Pamela too. Maybe my son would plead ignorance, maybe he'd known all along. But the truth was out now, and truth has a way of surviving. That night, as I sat on my porch wrapped in a blanket, O'Connor handed me a mug of coffee. You did good, Mrs. Rowe, he said. I stared at the dark street ahead. Not yet, I said softly. The nurse is still out there. He frowned. We'll find her. But I shook my head. No. I'll find her. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's a memory that refuses to die until the last lie does. And I hadn't forgotten a thing. I hadn't seen Nurse Pamela since the night I ran from the hospital. But she haunted everything that came after. Her voice was on the recordings, her signature on the fake forms, her fingerprints on my pills, yet she was nowhere to be found. The hospital said she'd resigned suddenly for family reasons. A lie wrapped in paperwork, sealed by fear. Detective O'Connor called it cleaning up. I called it cowardice. Weeks passed. Melissa was under investigation, facing charges for fraud and elder abuse. My son kept his distance, embarrassed, defensive, torn between guilt and self-preservation. The neighbors whispered, the news ran a short segment, and the world kept turning. But I didn't care about their pity. I cared about closure. And I wasn't getting any while Pamela Hayes breathed free air. One morning, O'Connor called. We found something, he said. An address, out in Lakeview. She's working at a private rehab clinic under a different name. Then I want to see her, I said. He hesitated. Evie, you're not part of law enforcement. Neither was she, I replied. And she played God with my life. There was silence on the line. Then he sighed. I'll meet you there. But you let me do the talking. I agreed, in words, not in heart. The clinic sat on the edge of Lakeview County, an hour's drive from my house. The building looked more like a spa than a hospital. Glass doors, manicured hedges, the smell of pine and deception. Inside, the receptionist smiled politely. Welcome to Clearwater Recovery. Do you have an appointment? O'Connor flashed his badge. Detective O'Connor, Sandfield PD. We're here to see Pamela Hayes. Her eyes flickered. I'm sorry, we don't have anyone by that name. Then maybe you know her as Pamela White, I said, stepping forward. That made her flinch. O'Connor leaned in. Tell her Evelyn Rowe stopped by. We'll wait. 5 minutes later, Pamela appeared at the end of the hall. Same uniform, same calm face, but her hair was shorter, lighter, as if a new color could wash off guilt. For a moment, we just looked at each other. I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of recognition, the crack in her composure. Mrs. Rowe, she said finally, forcing a smile. You look well. Better than you, I said. O'Connor gestured to a private office. We'll talk in here. She followed, every step careful, deliberate. She sat across from us, folding her hands neatly on the desk like a woman giving a job interview, not a confession. I'm not sure what this is about, she began. I placed the printed transcript of her recording on the desk. Let me remind you. Her eyes scanned the page, and for a brief second, her mask slipped, just enough to show the fear underneath. O'Connor spoke calmly. We have statements, recordings, falsified charts, all linked to your ID. You can make this easier by telling us who ordered it. Pamela's jaw clenched. I didn't order anything. I was following instructions. Whose? She hesitated. Family members often request additional care. Say her name, I interrupted. Her lips pressed into a line. I leaned closer. Say Melissa's name. Finally, she exhaled. Melissa Rowe, she said quietly. She told me her mother-in-law was slipping mentally, that she needed help managing her affairs. I was supposed to monitor you, make notes, keep her updated. And the drugs? O'Connor asked. Pamela's voice dropped. She paid me to give you mild sedatives, said it was to help your anxiety. I didn't know she planned to falsify the paperwork. You didn't know? I said, my voice rising. You forged signatures. You took my ring. You recorded my words out of context to make me sound insane. Pamela's expression hardened. You think you're the first old woman I've seen destroyed by her family's greed? I did what I was told. You had a choice. I snapped. You always had a choice. The room went silent. Even O'Connor didn't interrupt. Pamela stared at me for a long moment, then looked away. I lost my job. My license. What more do you want? The truth, I said. In writing. O'Connor slid a notepad toward her. Start talking. By the time we left Clearwater, I had a signed confession and a headache that felt like justice. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. A week later, Melissa's attorney requested a plea deal. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse, the charges piled up like stones. My son didn't visit once during the hearings. Abby sat beside me every day, her small hand in mine, her eyes shining with loyalty and pain. You shouldn't have had to go through this, she said one morning. I smiled faintly. Sometimes, the people who love us forget who we are. The trick is reminding them. She squeezed my hand. You reminded everyone, Grandma. The trial stretched into summer. The courtroom smelled of paper and nerves. Melissa sat at the defense table in a tailored suit, looking more like a politician than a criminal. She avoided my eyes every time I entered. When the prosecutor played the audio recordings, she flinched. When Pamela's confession was read, she stared at her lap. And when the judge asked if I had anything to say before sentencing, I stood up, slow, deliberate, and looked her straight in the eye. I loved you like my own daughter, I said. I trusted you with my family, my home, my heart. And you sold them all for paper and pride. But I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. The courtroom was silent. Even the air seemed to listen. Melissa's voice cracked as she whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded. So am I. She was sentenced to 5 years with parole, Pamela to 3. Not enough, maybe, but justice rarely is. The newspapers called it the Lakeview scandal. They loved the irony, a nurse and a daughter-in-law conspiring to silence an elderly widow, undone by the very woman they tried to erase. I stayed out of the spotlight. Fame was for the guilty and the hungry. I only wanted peace. Abby moved in with me that fall. The house came back to life, music in the kitchen, laughter echoing down the hall. I found joy in small things again, a clean porch, morning coffee, the smell of rain without fear. But one afternoon, as I was tending the rose bushes by the front fence, a white envelope slid under the gate. No address, no stamp. I bent slowly, picked it up, and opened it. Inside, a photograph. Me, asleep in my hospital bed. The timestamp, 3 days before my escape. And written across the back in neat handwriting. You can't remember everything. The world tilted slightly beneath my feet. The handwriting, it wasn't Pamela's. I walked inside, closed the door, locked it twice. Abby looked up from her laptop. Everything okay, Grandma? Just fine, I said, sliding the photo into my cardigan pocket. But that night, as I sat by the window, I studied the writing again under the lamplight. The loops in the letters, the slant of the T's, too familiar to ignore. It was my son's handwriting. I didn't sleep. I sat there until dawn, the letter on the table beside my cooling cup of tea. Pamela was in prison. Melissa was gone. But someone else had been watching, guiding, covering. Maybe he hadn't just been ignorant. Maybe he'd been pulling strings all along. At sunrise, Abby came down the stairs in her pajamas, yawning. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said, forcing a smile. Old bones. She poured coffee and sat beside me. You know, Mom says Dad's been quiet since everything. He's not handling it well. I imagine not, I said softly. She looked at me, concerned. You're not thinking about reaching out, are you? I stared out the window, where the light broke through the clouds. Not yet, I murmured. But soon. Because if he'd been part of this, if he'd watched them tear me down and said nothing, then forgiveness would be a luxury I couldn't afford. And if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that justice doesn't end in a courtroom. It ends when the last lie is buried, and the truth stands alone. When you've been betrayed once, you start expecting it from every corner. I used to believe family meant safety. But after the trial, I learned the hard truth. Sometimes the wolves don't wear strangers' faces. They share your last name. For a while, I tried to live quietly. The house felt alive again with Abby around. She filled the kitchen with music, laughter, and little reminders that love could still sound innocent. I watered my husband's roses, fixed the curtains Melissa tore down, and even learned how to make coffee without bitterness in every cup. But that piece never felt complete. Not with that photograph still hidden in my drawer, the one with my son's handwriting. You can't remember everything. Every time I saw it, I heard his voice in my head, the way he used to sound when he'd get caught lying as a boy. Calm. Charming. Dangerous. I kept telling myself there must be another explanation, that maybe he'd written it years ago, that I was imagining things. But a mother knows her child's writing. She knows the way each letter bends, the way each word holds a secret tone. It wasn't my imagination. It was a warning. Detective O'Connor called once or twice after the sentencing, checking in. You're officially in the clear, he said. The state dropped the hospital's civil suit against you. You're free to move on. Free. It's a strange word when you realize freedom sometimes means living with what's left. I didn't tell him about the letter. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I spent the next few weeks rebuilding what I could. Abby helped repaint the porch. We planted new lilies by the walkway. Every stroke of paint, every new bloom, felt like a quiet victory. Then one morning, as I was pruning the roses, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. My son Daniel stepped out. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. Dark circles under his eyes, a crisp suit that didn't fit right, a faint tremor in his hands. Mom, he said, closing the car door softly. We need to talk. I wiped my hands on my apron. Do we? He looked down, jaw tight. I didn't know Melissa would go that far. I swear I didn't. I crossed my arms. You didn't stop her either. His shoulders slumped. You were angry. You weren't answering my calls. I thought she could help. By drugging me? By taking my house? By forging my signature? His voice cracked. I didn't know she'd do all that. I stared at him, searching his face for the boy I raised, the one who used to fix my garden fence and steal cookies before dinner. All I saw was a man who'd traded conscience for comfort. You sent me that letter, I said. He froze. What letter? Don't lie. I stepped closer. The photo. The handwriting. You can't remember everything. That was you. His eyes flickered, guilt, fear, recognition, all in one heartbeat. Then his mask returned. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, I said quietly. You wanted me scared. You wanted to remind me that you were still in control, even after the trial. That's not true, he said quickly, too quickly. Then why show up now? He hesitated. Because I need your help. I almost laughed. Help. He nodded, desperate now. Melissa's sentence might affect my finances. The investigation froze some joint accounts. I'm trying to fix it, but the lawyers said. There it is, I said softly. The motive. Still the same after all this time. It's not about money, Mom. Then what is it about? He opened his mouth, but no words came. Only silence. For a long moment, we just stood there. The wind rustled the trees, the faint smell of lilacs filling the air. Abby's laughter drifted from inside the house, pure, unbroken, untouched by this rot between us. Finally, I said, you should go. He blinked. What? I mean it, Daniel. Whatever you're looking for, it's not here anymore. Mom, please. No, my voice was steady now. You made your choice when you stood by and watched them try to erase me. I buried your father once, and that was pain enough. I won't bury my own son's conscience too. He stood there, eyes glistening. "You'll regret this." I shook my head. "I already regret raising a man who thinks regret is a weapon." He didn't reply. He just turned and walked back to his car, slamming the door hard enough to startle the birds from the fence. The engine roared, and he sped away, leaving the gravel trembling behind him. That night, I sat by the kitchen table long after Abby went to bed. The photograph lay in front of me again. Under the lamplight, the words looked darker than ever. "You can't remember everything." Maybe he meant it as a threat. Or maybe it was guilt, his way of confessing without saying it out loud. Either way, he was right about one thing: I couldn't remember everything. Not what happened the exact night I fell. Not what I said before the ambulance came. Not whether someone had pushed me or whether my own legs betrayed me. But the truth has a way of crawling back when you least expect it. I closed my eyes and tried to trace it all back. The glass breaking. The dizziness. Melissa shouting for help. My son's voice calm, too calm, "Don't touch the drawer." Then something new surfaced. A flash of movement, not Melissa, but Daniel. Standing by the drawer, pulling something out before the paramedics arrived. I gasped softly. My memory wasn't gone, it had just been buried under fear. He'd taken the folder before I ever got to the hospital. He'd known everything. My hands trembled. The room seemed to pulse around me, heartbeat echoing off the walls. He wasn't a bystander. He was the architect. The next morning, I called O'Connor. "I need to amend my statement," I said. He sounded wary. "Evie, are you sure you want to reopen this?" "I'm sure," I said. I remembered something. 2 hours later, his car pulled into my driveway. I handed him the photograph, the letter, and my account of that night, the missing piece. He listened quietly, taking notes. When I finished, he nodded. "We'll investigate. If what you're saying is true, your son could face charges as an accessory." "I don't care about charges," I said. "I just want him to stop before he destroys himself completely." O'Connor's voice softened. "You still love him?" "Of course," I said. "But love doesn't mean blindness. It means seeing someone clearly, even when it hurts." He gave me a long look. "You know, you'd make a hell of a detective." I smiled faintly. Maybe in another life. Weeks later, the truth came full circle. The police found copies of my documents on Daniel's old hard drive, financial files, sign transfers, even drafts of the forged forms Melissa had used. He'd planned everything, then handed it to her when he got cold feet. When they arrested him, he didn't fight. He just looked tired. O'Connor told me later, he said he didn't mean for it to go that far. That it started as a way to pay off debts. Debts. Always money. Always the same poison. At the hearing, Daniel refused to meet my eyes. Abby cried softly beside me, her hand gripping mine. The judge sentenced him to 2 years probation, community service, and full restitution. It wasn't prison, but it was consequence, the kind that sticks. Afterward, he finally looked up. "Mom," he said. "I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. "You should be." Then I turned and walked out before he could say another word. Life after truth is quieter. Not peaceful, exactly, but honest. Abby and I kept rebuilding. I sold the hospital bed, tore down the medication reminders, filled the house with light. I started journaling again, not to remember the pain, but to remind myself that I survived it. Sometimes, I still hear Pamela's voice in my dreams, or see Melissa's smirk in the mirror. But when those ghosts visit, I let them. I pour them tea. I remind them I'm still here. Because they wanted me erased, a confused old woman who wouldn't notice her own disappearance. Instead, I became the one who wrote it all down. One evening, Abby found me at the table, writing. "Grandma," she said gently, "why do you keep writing the same story over and over?" "Because stories fade," I said, closing the notebook. "And people forget. I want to make sure I don't." She smiled, wrapping her arms around me. "You'll never forget again." "Maybe not," I said softly. "But even if I do, it's all here." The sun dipped low beyond the garden that evening, painting the roses gold. The same ones my husband planted decades ago. They died once, then bloomed again. I took one blossom in my hand, tracing its petals. You can't remember everything, I whispered to the wind. But you can remember enough. And that's all I needed. Because memory isn't just what you keep in your mind, it's what you refuse to let the world erase.